Yeah, so welcome to UC Buyer TV. It's been a fun ride. We've always had some great guests, but the one that we're going to talk to today, I'm very pumped up that he has said yes to this interview. So partially because it strikes home for me very personally. I mean, let's go back to 2002 when I was selling memory chips and components to manufacturers all around the world. And I was seeing things from Metaswitch. I was seeing things from a group called Cilantro, which Broadsoft ended up buying. And I was seeing Broadsoft. And so I got together a couple of engineers, voice engineers, and I said, who should we choose for a platform? And they said, go with Broadsoft. They're the leaders, go with Broadsoft. So we did, and we jumped in. And that's when I met Mike Tessler. And so together, the engineers from Broadsoft worked with my engineers, and we invented this technology together and scaled it together. And so today we have Mike Tessler with us, the founder of Broadsoft. The guy saw it all the way through until just recently when Cisco bought them. So Mike, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple quick comments because, like Dave, I've got a personal history here, and that I think I met you for the first time, Mike. I actually met your team for the first time when I was leading sales at XO. We chose to go on BroadCloud at the time. That's probably 2011 timeframe, and then left there and went to AMPI and had to launch a UC product in record time and take it into the ILEC market. And Broadsoft and Polycom were my MVPs in terms of getting us launched in record time. You were a personal advocate for us, and we've been evangelizing this great technology. So, man, I couldn't be more pumped up to have you on and talk about timely. You know, you and I got together for lunch, I guess, 3-4 weeks ago in Miami. Who would have guessed we'd be here today talking about the entire globe having to do everything virtual, work from home because of what's happened with coronavirus. So I got to imagine it's got to be humbling, profound for you being the global leader, innovator of much of the technology that's being deployed as we speak, and saving lives, saving businesses. So welcome aboard, and I'll fire the first question. So how does it make you feel looking at what's happening around the globe and knowing that the technology that you and your team developed is making such an impact today?
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks again, Dave. Well, it's pretty exciting, but in a strange time. Clearly, we've always been very strong believers that the communication capabilities should be in the cloud, should be out, really out of the premise and into the cloud for exactly the reasons we're seeing in terms of business continuity, work at home, all of the capabilities of really enabling the workforce to be able to kind of work from anywhere has always been a very strong part of the proposition and the reason for the capability. Early on in the life of Broadsoft, we saw what I would call, situations where there was a earthquake or there was a hurricane, kind of, what I would call localized compared to what we're dealing with today. And we saw the results of having the, businesses have their communication capabilities in the cloud and having that level of redundancy in the cloud really lead to the fact that these companies could continue to operate. There was really a business continuity imperative, but it was always, kind of came and went. There was it was a panic for a couple of days, and then it kind of went away. And then, people kind of forgot about it. And now we're faced with a global situation where I think people are going to have to eventually face up to the fact that it's no longer, it's no longer a nice to have. You got to have the ability to have the flexibility of your communications capabilities in the cloud. And I think you said save lives. I was talking to someone who was being, asked, last week to go into a 300-person call center. And it's not responsible. It's just not a responsible situation. And it's just a lack of leadership in terms of our companies who have not kind of taken that imperative to move over to the cloud. So I'm hoping, sadly enough, that this is kind of will create the clear need, because I think a lot of people think it was a nice to have. I'll move it to the cloud. It's nice to have, or maybe I can save some money. Now people realize that it's no longer a nice to have.
No doubt about it. And I'd be curious, because I remember as early as when we were jumping in to sell UC to the market, this having been already developed as a technology capability, 10 10 years ago. So I'd be curious what the vision was and what, how it came to be that you developed this set of technology to enable exactly what's being deployed today. It's the people that are working remote, virtual, because I know lots of Connections Conference I saw, you're talking about the future of work. So I'd love to hear the story about how this came to be, behind the scenes, what you guys were doing to, how'd you come up with the idea and how did you breathe that to life?
When we started, we actually, a lot of us were class 5 switch guys or gals. We came out of the big iron. Funny enough, we all thought that was those big pieces of iron had double redundancy, lots of hardware. Rarely your class 5 switch would fail, except when you had really radical situations. And one that comes to mind, which again, thinking back of another bad period, was 9/11. And frankly, we basically lost end offices. Like we had tremendous redundancy, but they were local site redundancy. And what we realized leading up to that and going through that was that IP enabled us, the underlying IP infrastructure enabled us to build truly geographic redundancy. That was one of the first really kind of critical changes. It was not site-based, it was geo-based. And so there was no concept of losing a data center. Well, you had another data center. There was no a single point of failure. We really kind of eliminated that. And that became clear, in a number of situations where earthquakes, hurricanes, where we lost end offices, and any business that was connected to that very expensive, purpose-built, redundant hardware, class 5 hardware, they were out of business. And so that was a really important part of it. I think early on, we also had, if you think about the mission of Broadsoft for many years, it was really, how do we move the PBX from the LAN to the WAN? The WAN is the public network. A lot of people say, well, why? Why would you do that? And one of the main reasons was workforce flexibility. And, I think probably in 2008, I can't remember, it's a long time ago, we coined this thing called the remote office feature, which enabled you to basically kind of, work anywhere from even an analog station on your mobile, et cetera. That we felt was a real differentiator, because people say, oh, I've got a PBX, it works, why would I want to move to the cloud? And we said, well, you can't do this on your PBX. You can't really work wherever you want. You can't have the flexibility of your workforce. And so really it became clear that yes, we were moving PBX workloads to the cloud, but we were also, when we did that, in the case of enterprise communication, we were enabling business continuity, work at home, work remote. We were enabling some additional capabilities that fundamentally were not capable in the way that we used to deliver those workloads as a PBX. And
Right.
so that's kind of where some of that really kind of early thoughts of highly redundant geographic redundancy and remote office kind of thoughts came out of.
The other thing I find that's fascinating right now is the companies that there's a big difference I've seen, because you talked about I think I know what company you're talking about with the call center issue. And I had to read the article 2 or 3 different times to think, geez, it just doesn't seem right that a company, especially that's in technology, would not have the capability to quickly pivot. But the companies that have it in place are pivoting quick, right? They're literally, for these guys, it's as easy as unplugging your desktop phone. You don't even have to have a desktop phone. And same day, they could be home just doing the exact same work from their house. So clearly there's a difference in terms of companies, but a lot of the market really isn't up to speed in terms of how quickly, if you are flat-footed, this technology can be developed and put in place pretty quick, because the software can be scalable pretty quick. You don't have to replace your whole PBX. And you guys developed a lot of that with really easy to use interfaces, quickly scalable infrastructure. So I'd love to hear your take on, as the whole globe moves on to these platforms, for the CIO who's thinking, geez, I'm flat-footed, there really is an answer here and they can pivot pretty quick. And love to hear your thoughts on how just platforms in general are built to be scalable and quickly adopted for an enterprise user.
In a lot of telephony situations, the one challenging point of the overall system is the phone number and the porting of the phone number. And if you wanted to get on board, and you just have to kind of make some compromises around porting those numbers, and you may be forwarding them to a cloud system, which is perfectly fine. You may eventually want to, clean up that telephony interface. But from the applications itself, they're extremely robust. They're all being rolled out of the cloud. UXs are simple to use. The training is fairly easy. Employees can use that on laptops and iPads and these kind of things, mobile devices. You've got a wide range of flexible devices that your work at home users can take advantage of, and not just voice, but messaging and video, which is becoming a much bigger medium as we see today. The ability to roll these things out is not that complicated. Most of the platforms can handle high scale onboarding pretty quickly. And I think just generally, I think you guys probably see this, closer to it, but it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time on training and onboarding of employees. People are pretty familiar with these tools and can get on board pretty quickly.
Question for both of you guys. Prior to entering this crisis, where did adoption stand? Because you see varying numbers, but global adoption, where do you think it is heading into this crisis?
Yeah, the world has changed forever. We're not going back from here, because people have had to set up these triage kind of situations. And they're still experimenting, trying to get it right. What are the tools that you really need? What kind of conferencing deck are you going to use? And get your people kind of up to speed and comfortable working remotely. We've been trying to preach this for 2 decades, Michael.
Right.
So really, it's a big change, but not really. It's incremental. It's been coming for a while, and this whole epidemic has forced everybody to do something about it and sort of perfect their idea of remote working or working from home. But wow, there's still 200 million landlines out there.
At least, yeah.
Crazy.
I think the penetration rates are fairly low if you go across the globe and across industries. I think it's a pretty small number. And I think I'd be hopeful that CIOs will not look, as Dave said, will not look back and say, oh well, I put in a stopgap and the epidemic goes away and I'm back to running my old network. And that really there is no that. A lot of times what we've seen in the last years is this effort to move all the communications to the cloud is always kind of lagged, and people say, oh, I can do that next year, and I've got a PBX, I'll survive another year on it, and so on. And hopefully this has clearly showed that it's not a matter of nice to have or save money by going to the cloud, that if you are really a responsible business owner and you want to have business continuity and you want to be able to operate through these kinds of situations, and you don't know what the next situation is going to be, that you're able to have that flexibility that comes from operating these capabilities from the cloud and having a more agile workforce that's able to work remotely. And Dave made a comment, it's we have technology and we also have the whole the way we work. Broadsoft, we had employees in 23 countries, and we used a ton of video. We had to kind of develop how we work together in a different way than getting together face to face all the time. And so I think there's the technology, and I think there's the human cycle around it and getting comfortable with it. And then in these times is also, I think some of the tools are actually helpful in dealing with the isolation of us all working in our basements or home offices or wherever we are today. And again, the ability to connect more frequently with colleagues is helpful. I think about the technology, which I think is there, and I think I encourage everybody to kind of get quickly on board. And then how do you really get your teams to collaborate more effectively? I think you made a comment about future work. Is really what we were trying to figure out was how to make that easier for people to work together in a more flexible way, and so that we could have teams remote and be able to collaborate more efficiently.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate the fact that you and Scott thought about this so many years ago, sort of envisioning this sort of situation that the world finds itself in, and giving those businesses an opportunity to create a solution, not just sell a product. A phone is a product. But it was all those 340 something features that we thought was way overkill. You guys were visionary enough to say, you know what, if you combine these 6 features you're going to have a business changing solution that will make you bulletproof in terms of holding your team together. So thank you. You know, it was an incredible vision, even though trying to sell 340 features was a crazy time for us.
Well, and that brings up an interesting point, Dave. You know, I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but back when Broadsoft recently introduced UC1, we were there was a global benchmark, and one of my sales guys from Broadsoft said, "Hey, by the way, just a heads up, you guys are number one globally service provider. You guys are like at 50% of your seats have UC1 on it, and kind of our global standard is we're trying to get everybody to 20%." But fascinating thing was although we had 50% of our seats had UC1 features on it, the number of users of that subset that would use it consistently was only like 20-25%. So we studied the hell out of, you know, obviously the buyer wants to use those features. They think it's a good thing for their business, but how do you get people using it? And what we found is, you know, one is Broadsoft made it easy with software that's intuitive, easy to use, but it's also teaching people, training them, top-down driven approach in terms of reinforcement, but it's also just snap of the cord and forcing people to use it till it becomes a habit. How much of an impact does this make? And has the way we work forever been changed? Because if people are using this technology for 60, 96 months, they're going to find, you know, they're going to get very good at it. And what does this do for the future of business and the way we work? And does everything that you develop, Mike, now become a way of life and change the face of business globally?
I think that we always struggled with two things. Awareness. People don't really understand the capabilities, especially in certain markets where video hadn't been very successful or some of these capabilities. So we struggled with just awareness and how do you get the the business population to be aware of the capabilities. And I do think you're right. I think the necessity will create adoption way above what we ever thought in true kind of normal sales cycles. And I think that people will start to kind of become more comfortable, more reliant. You know, we always, you know, we were always trying to figure out how to help our partners with things like adoption by giving you videos and training and hopefully making the software easy to use and all that stuff. But it still was always, as you guys experienced, the adoption you know, wasn't high enough. I tell you, I would visit some of our service provider partners, and I could see why they weren't successful is because they weren't even using it internally. You know, you know, when I looked at Broadsoft, the number of video minutes we would use on a daily basis. I mean, I never made a call in the last few years of Broadsoft that wasn't video internally. But a lot of our partners were selling the UC1 capability, but not using it internally, not experiencing it. And I agree, you know, the comment, you know, a lot of that's top down. You got to demand that, you know, calls were that. And so we would go out and see, conference rooms not equipped with video and so on, which was frustrating in the sense that people just weren't adopting the technology at a fast enough rate. I think I don't think the genie goes back in the bottle. I think people are experiencing it. It's a way of life. I think what'll be interesting to me, and as kind of a thought, you know, what happens 12 months from now when, you know, we hopefully are through all this and all the countries are through this wave, how much business gets done on video, how much business gets done internally. And then one of the biggest challenges we experienced was really getting companies to work, you know, outside, you know, kind of intercompany video and stuff. How much has that changed forever? How much the adoption has changed? And can you operate a business without a full UC suite, you know, going forward, or that just doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the fact that the technology is the difference between companies that have it and don't. It's stunning. I mean, there's going to be companies that, I think we saw it in Hurricane Sandy. I talked about this on a prior podcast. When Hurricane Sandy hit, I was leading sales at XO. We had a huge customer base in New York City. Many were down hard for weeks. 40% of those didn't survive. And for those that did, it served as a catalyst moment that it was a wake-up call for businesses that hadn't yet moved to the cloud. There was a flurry of activity for the following 6 months to make sure that they're ready, right? And so what does that do on that front for all those, you know, you talked about that still fairly early stage relative to adoption in the enterprise. that was kind of the final frontier for many of the UC. It started off adoption in SMB, then moved up market a little bit more, and now it just started really in the enterprise. So what does this do for adoption of UC in the enterprise?
I think that from the experience in the last couple of years, and obviously, Cisco is a very enterprise-focused organization. We had seen the adoption or the CIOs kind of, getting serious about plotting through the transformation of their networks to the UC or to cloud. Still looking at it as kind of a 24, 36, 48 month kind of project in terms of making those transformations. Especially we're talking very large 50,000, 100,000 seat organizations, just the size and scale of the transformation. I think this kind of tilts the priority up for that transformation and likely makes that overall period happen quicker. So I would say that there was high interest, a lot of focus, but very kind of guarded or conservative transformation projects, POC, first office, country A, country B, kind of slowly going. It's like kind of slowly, carefully through that. I think this is going to kind of throw some of that care and caution to the wind and say, geez, we just got to get there. We can't take 48 months. Now, we're gonna hit some physical roadblocks, how many people are there to do that and number changes and all that stuff. It will speed the transformation faster than had originally planned. I don't think there was any, from what my interactions with Fortune 100 CIOs, there never seemed to be, we're not going to do this. It's, okay, we're on a path, help us get there in some, measured way. But now I think that measured way is going to let go to a much more fast-paced. I think probably in 2 years, we're going to see a much larger number of these companies have moved over. Some of them will have some kind of struggles in terms of resourcing, project management. I think what you'll see as just kind of a necessary imperative is that some of those CIOs or some of the project teams obviously will have to let some requirements go, like requirement down, speed up.
Right.
Okay, we don't get every feature, we don't get everything that we used to have, but can we go 3 times faster? I think the trade-off will occur, speed over transparency, which is always a very bad term. I had this on my PBX, I want it on my cloud service. And I think generally what people will see is, speed and global resource flexibility will outweigh and outwin the transparency requirements. And so I think that will shift dramatically. And so instead of doing one of these 6 months evaluations of what we need and where and this and all that, people just say, okay, everybody in the company is going to get a soft client tomorrow. And
right.
Boom, and you're all going to get a new phone number tomorrow. Boom. And, we'll figure out porting next month. You could imagine that that's just the way things are going to happen. And so that you can move in a much faster transformation. We've seen, companies move a 200-person site and it's very involved and there's days and days of project management, of on-site support to kind of support the employees to make the transformation. And I wonder whether all that goes away and we just kind of go, okay, everybody gets a soft client. Everybody's on the network tomorrow. And maybe, there's some tooling that gets better over time, but that's kind of the baseline. That could be done fairly quickly. It doesn't require a tremendous amount of planning or re-engineering. Right. If I was any one of those CIOs with 50,000 seats, that would be my tomorrow imperative.
It almost feels like 3 waves. It feels like wave 1 is move at warp speed to get everybody equipped with the tools. That's wave 1, get everybody out there, the user credentials set up, here's what you need to go do. Then the next wave is, all right, how do we get them using it in their day-to-day lives to replicate? And that's probably a couple months to get everybody in the condition of using the tools and working out the kinks of how do we operationalize that. And then the third wave, whenever we get on the other side of this, is going to be circling back to kind of clean things up. And maybe by that point, you've learned that, hey, there's certain functions in the company that you can do remote. We don't need as much office space, but that's when I think a lot of the meaningful, so it's kind of almost a reverse of the process before. It's like do all the research, make sure you replicate and, replicate all the users, the call flows, get it in place, get them using it, and then circle back and clean it up.
Yeah, I think that's the way Americans think. And so as we look at the worldwide platforms, though, I could just see a German listening to this going, what? That doesn't work. Because when I got over into the European nations with the CCA, I realized that they are that measured, careful culture out there. And we're kind of breaking a lot of things as we move fast, and we don't seem to mind that things break. We just sort of pick it up and fix it. So hopefully the world can catch on to this idea. It's okay to not have it be perfect at first. But if you drive past that, you invent stuff, you create stuff, you make stuff happen in a way that truly changes the way a business works.
When you look at, like you, Mike, I use the video, and once you get in the habit of using it, it allows you to, be more engaged with your remote people. I mean, it really generally works. And I know it firsthand, firsthand. I think these companies that don't move fast, I mean, they're going to have to, because if they don't, employees are going to start getting disengaged, right?
Yeah. We used to say that you're either part of the quick or the dead. You have to be running, hair on fire. So, and Broadsoft was very helpful in getting us to move, getting us to continually throw stuff up against the wall and see if it worked.
I agree with your comment is we have different societies with different kind of behaviors, and some markets are much more measured and others are much handle risk and uncertainty a little bit better. So yeah, I think when you have no choice, you have no choice, and you have to kind of get on with it. Even some of those more conservative markets will have to move if they want to survive and prosper through these kind of disruptions. They're going to have to kind of get on board.
Well, I think one of the most genius things that you guys ever invented was this thing called simultaneous ring. When the phone that's in your pocket is working with the phone that's on your desk. That was a good middle step. But now with 5G, it seems like there's another whole movement towards mobility. Can you speak to that?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things that I think is really important in the strategy, we're very focused in moving that PBX workload. So we did lots of work with handsets, and handsets were a really important part of the offer for as you know well, Dave, in terms of distributing and making it look like a PBX delivered from the cloud. And I think more and more now the strategy of cloud communications, whether that's phone or messaging or video or contact center or whatever that enterprise communication workload, and mobility is becoming an imperative. With a simple, kind of mobile, good mobile device in my pocket, I can pick up my workspace and I can go anywhere. That's more true today than it's ever been. I think that's a really important part of the imperative. So I think if I'm CIO, I want to worry less about shipping hard boxes to my employees, and I want to make sure that everyone has one of these that has a good speaker and a good camera. I was very fortunate. I'll give a plug to our dear friend Taher, who sent me a really beautiful Samsung device. It's my only plug today. It has an amazing camera, and I can do video on this. I can do it anywhere. So I think one of the things that this kind of enables us to get away from employees who might not have enough internet at home. Again, I got my 5G or 4G or LTE connection. I've got a really powerful device. And if I need to move, I can very easily move my office by just taking the device. So I think a little bit and flexibility in terms of what you give your employees, plus moving the workloads in the cloud is a really great combination of really setting up your workforce for flexibility and not being tied with a lot of hardware. We don't want the same kind of hardware heaviness at home that we had in the office. This kind of really solves that issue.
I think I sent you an email following your really heartfelt reflection of when you left Cisco here a couple of weeks back. As you look back, that was a really impressive piece, and you could feel it every time I went to Connections, how passionate you were about the business and your employees and what they did as a team. But does this put it in a whole different perspective, knowing that team that you led developed technology that's going to change the world at this point?
you never really realize, until things like this happen. I mean, I think I was really, proud of the team, developing the product, delivering it, supporting it. Sometimes support folks don't get enough credit. When I would always talk to our partners, they would always, highly commend the support they got. There's always one of those bad days where things go wrong, and it's not how things work on the good days, how you react on the bad days. And I think we did a pretty good job, and the team was really great at supporting our clients around the world. I think the team did a great job. To me, the team was the extended team of not just the Broadsoft employees, but all of the service providers that joined the journey early, helped us figure it out, helped us define the industry, helped us craft the messaging, helped us sell. Ultimately, we would never have been successful unless you guys actually convinced your clients to actually take the plunge and get on this cloud thing when it was really early. And without that, we couldn't have ever have been successful. And the success here drove success in other countries. People looked at it and said, "Oh, wow, these Americans and some Aussies and guys in New Zealand and a few markets were really kind of blazing ahead of everybody and took the chance." That allowed us to start to sell into Asia and to Europe and Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and Latin America, and even we had some foothold in Africa, which is a very early market for us. It was not just the Broadsoft direct team, but the extended, what I call the extended family of partners who, in many cases, like you guys, entrusted your businesses to us, to working with us. We respected that. We worked tightly together, and hopefully we launched an industry that will change things for the good.
Yeah. And any good Dave Gilbert stories? By the time I jumped in the fray, I think the first CCA meeting I joined was 2013 with AMPI. How much of an impact did Dave Gilbert and him leading the CCA? I heard some stories when I got in there, but I got to know Dave because when we jumped in, we were late to the game. And I looked at the market and said, "Man, marketing team, go do what Simple Signal's doing," because they got it dialed in. And by that point, you'd worked out a lot of the kinks on the platform. So I'd love to hear a Dave Gilbert story and some perspectives before I jumped into the fray.
Since we haven't cleared the NDA period yet.
And that is true. Yeah.
I think one of the things that Dave was always good at, he was always very much challenging us. I think Dave and his team did a really good job of really kind of engaging with their clients and trying to figure out how they would use the product. We spoke to some clients, but we would get all of that indirectly through our partners. And I think Dave was very passionate about his opinions and would share those and really enabled us to kind of get that closed loop from the end users. And I think Dave and a few others who were part of that passionate club really launched at CCA. And then kind of my only feedback was my response to Dave was, "Okay, I can't handle each one of you separately. I can't handle 5 days. So you guys got to come together and have one voice." And I think that's been good for the industry. Was good for Broadsoft for many years in terms of getting really good feedback from the folks that had to sell it and support it and communicate the messaging about it. All that really was a vital feedback for us to being successful.
Yeah.
Well, I can say thank you for indulging me with my passion, even though at times that looked more like a fight. But it was awesome that you gave me that kind of grace. So thank you.
Yeah. Excellent.
So Dave, any other questions?
It's just been great to get back and think about where we've been and where we're going. But once you get it going, it, like anything else, has momentum. It has a life of its own. And now look where it is. And it's not because of any one of us, really. It's the industry leaning into it and changing. And so, we talked a few months ago about the tremendous announcement of RingCentral buying a piece of Avaya and what that really could mean for the industry. And so we're out there changing businesses and helping that whole charge to bring premise-based phones that are just so one-dimensional over to the cloud where they can fully integrate with all of those cloud-based things. And Mike, you got that back in the early 2000s, and you preached that and evangelized that, and I picked it up as well as a whole lot of other guys. And I'm just excited to be where we are right now and helping the people who are just entering understand where we've been and where we're going.
So Mike, curious, and I guess the global crisis probably foiled what plans you had after an unbelievable run at Broadsoft. Most people probably pulling the ripcord and exiting would go on a world tour, maybe do some travel to some exotic places. So now that travel bans are imposed, how is the post-Cisco retirement or time treating you? And how are you keeping yourself busy?
The timing couldn't have been worse in terms of exiting and thinking about and planning actually a number of trips around the world to visit friends. I mean, one of the things that this the Broadsoft journey allowed me is to build really great friends, around the world. It's been great, and had plans to go and visit a few of those and spend some time, and now I'm going to have to do that a little later. So, I think trying to keep busy at helping some entrepreneurs, trying to help them scale their businesses. Looking forward to when this crisis will allow me to go get back to my original travel plans and get some time off. But strangely enough, lots of people looking for some help and advice on how to help scale their business, especially in these times. And so I'm trying to give back and help some of these entrepreneurs.
And so on that front, that's fascinating. That's probably a whole different topic for another day, but because nobody better than you to talk about how do you breathe a vision to life that really literally changes an entire industry and is now changing the way we work and enabling business sustainability and survivability. It's really amazing. So kudos to you, and we'll probably have you on again to talk about leadership tips for entrepreneurs from Mike Tessler. Because I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations that you're having.
I think my only advice is in all rough times, try to be as bold as you can. So it's hard, but I think you guys are good examples of that. Just kind of being real positive and trying to build and find what's good in the change. That's what I try to encourage the entrepreneurs, not get too down, and try to find what opportunities exist.
It's been a real pleasure because you made an impact on all of us. And for that, I want to thank you. And on behalf of every CIO out there who's putting this technology in place, I know they're appreciative of everything Broadsoft did. So thanks so much for joining us today. We'll have to have another conversation here in the not too distant future to keep us busy, eh?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.